I are in beautiful Natchez, Mississippi. It's one of the wealthiest cities in the country at the time of the war. Behind me, of course, is the Mississippi River. At the time, the water would not have reached as far as it does now. The water's edge would have actually been about 3 or 4 blocks out into the river where you see it today. The area was large enough to hold a lumber yard, actually, and a horse racing track. Now over here you see the American Queen steamboat, obviously. You can still book tours along the Mississippi River today, but you see tourists, of course, getting on and off the boat. 150 years ago, these would have been federal soldiers disembarking here to be an occupation of the city of Natchez. Natchez fell pretty early in the war, and so you'd have seen all sorts of transports docking here in this area and federal troops disembarking. And one of those soldiers was a woman named Jennie Hodgers, alias Albert D.J. Cashier, with the 95th Illinois. And as she would have disembarked from her transport, she would have marched up this hill with her regiment, and she would have noticed an area called Natchez Under the Hill. One Illinois soldier called it a cesspool of vice because it was inhabited by murderers and thieves and all sorts of unsavory characters. But as the soldiers would have marched up this hill and towards the upper town of Natchez, things would have improved greatly. So Mark and I were just at the area that you see behind me with the steamboats called Natchez Under the Hills, where federal troops would have disembarked to begin an occupation of the city. They would have marched up the hill to begin their occupation. But as I said a while ago, Natchez fell pretty early in the war. New Orleans fell about April of 1862. Natchez would have fallen shortly thereafter. But the support of the Natchez elite planners was not as steadfast as you may imagine, because almost half of them were northern born. They sent their cotton to northern factories for processing. They sent their children to northern schools for education. So there was a pretty profound connection between the elite planners here in Natchez with the North. So they feared that an impending war, of course, would interrupt their wealth that they had accrued. So they were real hesitant to support secession, but once secession happened, they did support the Confederacy initially, but the Confederacy did not support them the way they thought they should have been, and of course support waned over time, so Natchez fell pretty early on without much resistance. But federal troops, of course, came to Natchez to begin an occupation. Jennie Hodgers with the 95th Illinois was one of those federal troops. But the Illinois troops noticed how beautiful the city was during their occupation. Streets were laid out neatly. They noticed trees forming canopies over the wide streets, making Natchez a very beautiful city. But the 95th Illinois occupied Natchez from middle of July after the fall of Vicksburg in 1863 till about middle of October of 1863. And during that 3-month occupation, they were wrangling cattle that the Confederates were bringing from Texas to Joe Johnston's army around the Jackson area, so they intercepted the cattle, confiscating cotton and doing various jobs such as that. Not only that, but dealing with Confederate bands that were still lurking in the area. So hope that you've enjoyed this little tour of Natchez, so come check it out.